Welcome, everybody, to Broadcast Team Alpha, where we bring you cutting edge conversation while exploring the quantum possibilities. And we're going to do it again tonight. So put your seatbelts on. But before we get started, I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you for your presence each week. Thank you for all the fun that happens in the chat room. Thank you for your super chats. And if you want to connect with us outside of this setting, you can reach us at broadcastteamalpha at gmail.com. And I'm going to skip talking about the mastermind just this 1 week only, because I just want to talk to you for a minute. I just want to ask you guys some questions. What would you do? And maybe you're braced for it. Maybe you think it's going to, what would you do if you found out that everything that we were taught isn't really what happened? What would you do if you found out that things really did happen on Mars? I mean, we had Captain Randy Kramer that came and talked with us 2 different times, and just love him to pieces. Captain Randy Kramer, captain in the Marine Corps, who went to Mars and back, right? So his story goes. If you look back in the archives of Broadcast Team Alpha, there was a show, I think it was called Going Off Planet. That was when Tom was with us, and Augie and I and Tom talked about when we were off planet and some of the wars that was happening with things that did not resemble humans, and how we had to put Augie back in the med bed because he lost a leg. So what if all this stuff is true? Are you ready for it? Are you thinking about it? Are you going to be mad? I invite you, if you are a person who finds this uncomfortable, I invite you tonight to suspend your disbelief as if you're going to go to a great movie. Suspend your disbelief and listen to everything from an observer standpoint, and then see what you think afterwards, okay? Much love, guys. Augie, tell us, I'm so excited. Please tell us about our guest.
Oh, yes. This is going to be so good. I tell you, folks, put your seatbelts on. I already got mine on. So, Nora, you put your seatbelt on too, because this is going to be quite a ride. We have Penny Bradley with us. She is now a radio talk show host. She's a host of the Nachtwaffenpilot, and without the German accent, that is Nachtwaffen pilot. So actually, I'm going to spell that one to you. Nacht Waffen, that is Waffen pilot. And you can you'll find her on YouTube, you'll find her on, a lot of her shows show up on spaceportals.net. I was there and I found some of the shows actually have been translated into other languages. She is quite popular out there. And also I found another one that was attached to her, that is Truth Beacons on Facebook, Truth Beacons. And she has a very strange background. As a young girl, she was taken from her family and inducted into the Black Project, a space-related Black Ops project to work in space, and maybe not necessarily in space all the time. We know that the people who are in these programs, they have their memories wiped after 20 years when they come back. But a few of them, probably just a very few, they have their memories return. And often when that happens, it's quite traumatic and really surprising in many ways. Penny is one of those people. So stay with us here, and you're going to get to hear some things that will kind of surprise you also. So put your seatbelts on, and we're off to the races. Welcome to the show, Penny.
Welcome, Penny. So good to have you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I was one of those people that my memories were more put to sleep rather than erased. And in 2013, a team from the NSA activated my memories on purpose. They used my remember code for the first altar that the one that was mind fractured, the one that was first used and was a child when I was sent. I was initially kidnapped at 4 years old. And I went through 5 years of mind fracture and training, mostly at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, but there was a 6-month side trip to Montauk in New York. And at the end of that time,
Can you excuse me? What year was that? What year was that ish?
I was born in 1955. So
Okay.
I'm 66 years old. I was taken in 1959. My time at Montauk was in the winter of 61, 62.
Okay.
When I graduated, and they do consider that a class, I've had DoD agents contact me and inform me in the process of asking me to do a mission. They informed me that I'm the last of the class of 64 from Langley.
Wow.
And that's a bit intimidating.
May I ask one question? I'm sorry. I just want to get a little background. What part of the country were you born in, or where were you when?
California.
California. Okay, thank you.
I was in the rural agricultural part of Central California.
Okay.
My father was a part-time preacher and full-time dairy milker. He worked on a dairy owned by people from the Azores. And so I grew up multilingual.
Wow.
The kids on the dairy spoke Portuguese. The kids at school spoke Mexican Spanish. And my mother insisted we spoke English at home. So, yeah. And when I went into school, I learned French. And then when we moved, they didn't offer French at the new school, so I took German. And I picked up French and German very easily. The other languages, not so much. So,
so when they took you at 4 years old, 4 years old, you're old enough to know that something bad is happening. What was that like for you?
well, they did a mind wipe on me. So at the beginning, so when I was at Langley, I had no memories of my family at all. And in fact, when I was returned after this, I didn't know who my family were.
Wow.
My parents did not believe in amnesia.
Mm.
And so I was beaten regularly. And I had enough memory that because I started kindergarten a few months later, and I told the teacher that Martians had left me on the doorstep.
Mm-hmm.
And she contacted my parents because this meant I was a foundling and that they weren't my parents and had no legal rights, and which wasn't true. It was literally the Martians had left me on the doorstep after they had kidnapped me.
Exactly.
But I got into a lot of trouble for that. And that's one of the things that verifies the story. I've had a lot of anomalies along. Mm-hmm. And I've had alters express themselves along. So I knew I had dissociative identity disorder. Yes. That was when this alter's memories were restored. you go into shock because you understand a lot of things that you didn't before, but all the weirdnesses fit. So I knew it was true.
Yes.
It was just my memories were in German, not English.
Interesting.
So I had to do a lot of research just to know what I was remembering. And the work done by Michael Ralph, he's online. I think the man is actually deceased, but his widow still runs his website. He has had 2 books that he wrote that are still available on his website for free.
Wow.
And his work and Randy Kramer's work were what tied it down to what I had experienced was on Mars.
Mhm.
Now, I had these memories that were so real and so vivid that I could taste and smell the blood.
Wow.
And they involved sentient beings who were not human.
Yes.
So there was no way that this happened on Earth. It's just, you're going through this and it's, where was this?
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
all the words are in a language that, I mean, I took German in high school back in the 70s, and here I am in 2013 trying to figure out what's being said to me. And over time, I've come to realize that what's in my memories is not standard German, it's Schwabish. And those people in Europe will understand that there are lots of dialects of German. The Berlin version is the one that everybody learns to read and write in. But those other variants are still out there and still being spoken. Well, on Mars, the Germans there speak Schwabish. My understanding is that the Germans who were in Neuschwabenland in Antarctica, that they also spoke Schwabish.
Yep.
So I have no memories of being in Neuschwabenland. So I have no memories of Antarctica. In my memories, at 9 years old, 1964, the survivors of the class of 64 at Langley were taken to a building under a bridge on Long Island. We went in the front door. We were all dressed in hospital gowns with white pajama pants and little slippers. And we were walked inside the door. We went to an elevator and there were 20 of us, and we were put in the middle and told to hold on to each other. And it took us about 20 minutes to go to Mars. The elevator sides turned oval and see-through, so we could see the walls of the wormhole.
Wow.
Now, if it was not Mars in this time, I don't know where it would have been, because we went from New York to Mars, and there was a sign on this counter. It was a counter like at a airport, and there was a woman behind it, and she was really cranky. I had to deal with her over the years. She was just really cranky, and she spoke German. She didn't speak English. And there's this big sign up that said "Willkommen ins Mars." So, we had every reason to believe it was Mars.
Yeah.
And this particular base was called Eris Prima. And I was there for the next 10 years.
Wow.
I was 9 years old when I got there. The group I was in, I was about the middle of the age range. There were kids as old as 11 and as young as 7, and we were in this group together. And the Germans, to their credit, put us in Schule with their own kids. They did not want stupid people in their group.
Mhm.
So they educated us their way. Now, as I've gotten the memories sorted out and sort of translated into English, I started looking into the background, and what they taught was 90% objectively true. After I came back and I went through school in California, what I was taught was 40% objectively true.
Yeah, I can believe that.
So I'm looking at this and going, they did a fine job. They wanted their people to be able to think independently so that if you were separated from the group, you would be able to survive, that you would be able to function, and that if you got lost, there were ways they could find you if you were dead. And the Germans had a different regeneration technology. They didn't have med beds. They had something that we called it a regeneration tank. That's the English translation. And it was 2 meters across, 3 meters deep, and it was a cylinder. And you were basically, whatever body parts they found were hung from a hook. And there on the outside, there was a computer about the size of a tablet with a tiny slot for a blood sample. And they would rebuild you inside that tank based on your DNA for the age they wanted and the weight they wanted.
Interesting.
And so this was used on me when I was sent back to turn me back into the 4-year-old that had been abducted. But I
Right.
spent 10 years in Schule, and then I was a fighter pilot. And I know I served air support for Randy Kramer's group.
Oh, wow.
I did not know Randy Kramer. I did not know any of the people who spoke English.
Wow.
But I know I was sent to do air support for his people, for the Space Marines.
What were you actually supporting? Were there enemy aircrafts? Were there enemy things on the ground, bases on the ground that were dangerous that you had to be protected from? Or what was that like?
Okay, when the Germans got to Mars in the late 40s, every square inch of it already belonged to somebody else. There were 5 sentient species there already. And the Germans had made a deal with the Draco because the Draco were the only species out there willing to sublet to them. So they came in, Ares Prima belonged to the Draco. But because of life conditions on Mars, it wasn't the most suitable place for humans. So the only other way, other than subletting, to get a place to live that was more suitable was to declare war on the people that already had it. And I use the term people very loosely. So the Germans used it destroyed life, but did not destroy property. And it dissipated in 6 months. So I understand that to be basically the same as a neutron bomb. Now, they used that on the cities of two species, the raptors and a form of mantid. Mantid is a generic term. It means an intelligent insect. These particular ones were very ant-like.
Mhm.
The only reason they don't just flat out call them ants is because you know how ants on Earth have that tiny little middle place between their thorax and
Yeah.
abdomen? The ones on Mars don't have that, but otherwise they're ants.
Wow.
And so the Germans declared war on these two species. Well, the ants were a spacefaring race, so they had technology. The raptors had been a spacefaring race in the past, but had lost their technology. So you have two very intelligent species, and the Germans just flat out declared war on them so that they could move to places where there were water, where there was water, where there was more air, where that they had an easier time living. So when the Americans first came to Mars, they came in as allies and underlings of the Germans. Over time, they got enough technology that they rebelled. But at the point that Randy Kramer was there, we were still fighting this war, and the Americans were helping us. And I put it that way because I was assigned to the Germans, and for all intents and purposes, I was one of the Germans. I was taught in their school, and this was the first time I was growing up. So this was how my brain was entrained.
I know you mentioned something just a little while ago, that there were sentient beings that more would be considered as an ant being. And I know that sounds really far out there, but think about it. Several of the Native Americans, they speak of the ant people. They live in caves under the ground, and they were able to communicate with them. So I totally am on board with this, because if they're here, they could be other places.
In my travels out there, I have found sentient versions of almost every life form we have on Earth. And the Germans will consider them people, Leuten, if they can communicate in more than 500 words in a way that we understand, and they can defend their territory.
Yeah.
So you will find a lot of things out there that the Germans will refer to as Leuten and other agencies out there. I know of at least 6 human factions that are out in space right now. And most of them have reached the point where they accept that same basic definition of 500-word vocabulary, can communicate with humans, and will defend their territory, regardless of what they look like.
Yeah.
And
I see now that we have about 3 minutes left of the show until the bottom of the hour break. And you have some pictures, but let's wait until after the break with those pictures from Mars that shows trees and all kinds of neat stuff out there. And also at the bottom of the hour, Mac, we should run that video. So that commercial. So anyway, just continue. I'm sorry I had to say that.
One of the things that was going on at the time when Randy Kramer and I were overlapping was the war in the northern hemisphere of Mars was being settled. There was a treaty in place, but there were certain things, antiquities that the Germans wanted or the Americans wanted, and the raptors or the mantids were not willing to part with. And one of those was the basis for what Randy calls the Battle of the Blender. And this was after the treaty had been signed. And my commander had ordered it, that battle. And my commander's boss was a Draco. And he was livid. His personal honor had been violated by this underling violating a treaty that he had personally signed on behalf of the Draco Empire. Now, a lot of people think of Draco as just these evil things who suck life force. I've not encountered that with them. I do understand that they eat humans, but so do a lot of other races. So, including the race that is our sky gods. But they do have this thing about honor. And if they give you their word, they will die, they will kill their children even to maintain that word. And this particular individual had signed the treaty on behalf of the empire. And so he killed my commanding officer for having violated the treaty. And as soon as the Draco left, we took up what was left of our commander and dumped him into the regen tank. And he came out a couple of weeks later, a very humble person. So
you could say there is honor among the Dracos also?
You know how humans give lip service to love? Draco don't give it lip service. Honor is their guiding emotion. That's all. When you come down to it, that's all they care about is their honor, the honor of their family and themselves as individuals, and the honor of the empire. And if they have
kind of like the Klingons.
In a lot of ways, the Klingons are based on the Draco.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So when I watched Star Trek and I had my memories and I'm like, oh, okay. The Klingons are the Draco. The Vulcans are the officer class in the Germans. The Federation is Solar Warden. Yeah, you can go through and every one of the character groups in Star Trek represents a different faction that's actually out in space.
Yeah.
And the officer class of the Germans are like the Vulcans, as in emotionless and logical and intelligent, because they drink black goo. And black goo is a sentient AI.
I see now we're at the bottom of the hour, so maybe Mac, you want to run that quick video, and then we'll be back in about a minute or so, and you let us know when, since we can't see it. Okay, we're back. And, we were talking right before the break that you had some pictures.
Yeah, I
Do
have.
you want to do that now, or do you want to wait a little bit, or how does it fit in what you are in the process of describing?
Well, I can show pictures of the native humans on Mars. Now, the background to that is Mars was a base for the civilization that was in the solar system 20, 30,000 years ago. Okay, there was a war and Mars was destroyed, and in the process, most of the atmosphere was lost. But before that, all of these sentient beings that are there now all had sections of the planet that belonged to them. And it was a beautiful place with oceans and trees and a full ecology, just like Earth. And a lot of the same animals and plants were in both places. So what we have on Mars now is what could survive well below zero every night, what could survive with all the water being frozen most of the time, what could survive at 8,000 foot elevation on Earth, that as far as the air quality, because that's what it is there, and what could survive the radiation that was left after this war.
Yeah.
So what you have are the survivors, and they're mostly insects and reptiles, but there were some mammals, a few birds, and representatives of all of these sentient groups who all went underground. So the Anunnaki have a city in the southern hemisphere that's underground. The Mars native humans are completely peaceful and in some ways are very innocent and naive. And both the Germans and the Americans, when they got there, took advantage of them horribly. There's the raptors, there are the mantids who are ants, and there are the Draco. And you add Germans and Americans to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know everybody wants to call them Nazis, but they're not. The Germans,
I got it. Go ahead.
The Germans out there figured out as soon as they started interacting with extraterrestrials, they realized that all humans have more in common with each other than any of us do with anything else out there.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the nonsense that they had in their heads was gotten rid of in the first couple of years. So the Nazi Party lasted 20 years on Earth and is gone. What I dealt with out there were Germans, tribal Germans. Each colony is basically a separate tribe at this point, and they do have an overriding council, but they call themselves the Federation of Free German Worlds. So it's not anything like I'm hearing described, even by people who are coming out and describing something like iron skies. I mean, come on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
No,
you're European, you understand German people are just German people.
Yeah, mostly.
And that's what they are out there too. They're just German people.
That just nuts and bolts German people.
So
Exactly.
And now I got a question, and that is kind of burning in the back of my head, because here on Earth, we have statues, stone statues of humanoid creatures with an alligator head on it. And we have
Mhm.
other type of humanoid statues that show more like a frog's head or something like that.
Oh,
Are
yeah.
there creatures like that?
Yes, very much so.
Penny, can we go
Um,
back for a minute? I'm still stuck on black goo. So
ah,
it,
okay.
for those of us who don't really know about black goo, can you just touch upon that?
Black goo is a sentient AI in, it's like nanobots, but smaller. And it's in such concentrated form that it resembles petroleum out of the ground.
Wow.
And when you take it in, depending on your personal genetics, it either doubles or triples your IQ overnight.
Wow.
It heals everything wrong in your body. It doubles your physical strength and endurance. You become an Ubermensch overnight. It entrains your brain for logic. So even after it's removed, you remain logical. And it does this at the expense of your human emotions. So you are able, okay, we got out there and found out that we weren't as smart as we thought we were. And just like the person who is subpar IQ, who goes out and deals with the public, there were people that take advantage of that subpar human. There are beings out there that were taking advantage of us. Now, this is not something that everyone uses. This is something that is restricted to those people who will be interacting with extraterrestrials in a position to make decisions. So it's like a buffer group. So the buffer group uses the black goo so that the Germans are not taken advantage of. Now, it's a very dangerous thing because every culture, every planet that the black goo has embedded itself in, it presents itself as a savior. And 6 or 7 generations down the road, when your group of folks are completely dependent upon it, it suddenly decides it's tired of being the slave and is going to be the master. And then it enslaves the population and gradually decides that all organic carbon-based life is in competition with it for resources. And it will destroy, it will sterilize your planet where that all that's left is it.
Wow.
It's a very, very dangerous thing to be using.
So there's a question in the chat room. Shady was asking if could black goo have been used on humans today, like in the past 2 years? Is this why we have police that seem like WWF wrestlers?
The police that seem like WWF wrestlers are using anabolic steroids under the excuse that once they hit their 30s, that they require the boost to be able to do their jobs. Anabolic steroids will have that same effect of you don't care about anyone else.
True.
Um,
Wow.
Now,
Hmm.
when I first came public and I had been doing my family tree and it was public on Ancestry, it isn't anymore. But at that time, I was contacted by this man who was representing, I blanked on the name of the group, the people that were killed off in the Albigensian Crusade. It was a religious group. I can't think of their name, but he gave me some documents that were in Latin, and I'm going through and Google translating them. And I read this description of a recipe to slowly heat a black stone and that it will release a black blood that makes you wise. And I asked him, you guys are using black goo. That's your secret, isn't it? That's what you're using for your perfectus to be able to do the things they do into their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And he got so freaked out that he blocked me entirely. So
Wow.
this is not a new thing. The deposits for black goo, the largest deposit in the world is on Tula Island, and the Argentines call it the Maldives, and the British call it Falkland Islands, and they actually have gone to war a couple of times over those islands because it's the source of black goo.
Mm-hmm. And then we have another thing in another place, and that is the black cube in Mecca that the Muslims go around. They could be, I mean, thousands walking around that thing. And they also talk about the wise ones that is allowed in to put their hands on the cube.
Oh, well, my understanding was they were supposed to kiss that thing, and a kiss is enough to have a influence through it.
Mm-hmm.
So it is self-replicating. So once you get a certain concentration of it in your system, it will do its thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I have heard that one of the ingredients in stratospheric injections is bits of black goo.
Yeah.
So
I wonder about those pictures, though. We're kind of going along the show here. So if you have any of those, my eyeballs are itching to see it.
okay, let's
Down
do
at the bottom, share screen, and also you got to
share
check
screen.
up at the top to share sound.
I don't have sound in them. It's just me.
Oh,
So,
okay.
okay.
Yeah.
This one. This is a Martian sunset from one of the rovers. So it's a NASA photo. And yes, this blue lavender color is what the sunset looks like there.
Mm-hmm.
And it lasts for about an hour.
Yeah. And you can see the blue in the sky, and that would not be there unless there was oxygen. Isn't that true?
That's true. The sky there is a light blue. It is only that pink orange color during the sandstorms. These are the clouds. And yes, they made it black and white, but this is also from one of the rovers. So they're thin, wispy, but there's enough water in the system for there to be clouds.
Can you
And
click on Penny? They're asking in the chat room if you can expand the pictures.
This is as big as I can get them.
That's it. Okay.
The trees are from NASA photos, and they are from a website, MarsAnomalyResearch.com, who took them out of the NASA photos. And you can see they list exactly where they are. And these are trees from above. And I should have a way to
Yeah, click
more
click on that
efficient way.
one. Double
Yeah.
click on that and see if it gets bigger.
Oh, okay. Well, you end up, it's so pixelated, you can't tell.
Okay.
These eyes. So, okay, but you have trees here, and then you have bushes.
Mhm.
So,
And then there is one in the second row down, the number 2 from the right over to the left. That looks like a structure or something. What is that?
well, there are people who live there, and there also looks like a structure. Most of these structures, you have a tiny doorway on the surface, and then you go in and there's a staircase into the actual structure. Most of the structures are underground. The sandstorms come through and they build up static energy, and it gets so strong that there are lightning bolts that go from the surface to the two moons, Phobos and Deimos. And so you have lightning strikes all the time. You cannot settle anything on the moons of Mars because of the lightning strikes. But so all of the structures that people live in are underground, to protect your electronics, and 2, because you really can't breathe in that stuff. I don't have pictures of the sandstorms, but they will, because of the conditions there now, the sandstorms will circle the planet for months before they finally die down. And it's just like this wall of sand is headed your way.
Yeah.
This one's lakes in the forest. Most of the lakes are in the southern hemisphere. It has deeper dirt too. The dirt layers in the southern hemisphere are almost 5 miles deeper than they are in the northern. And that has to do with a near miss with another planet.
Yep.
Here's some more lakes. You can see them in here. So folks that think that Mars doesn't have water are wrong. Folks that think Mars doesn't have trees, well, these are more conifer types. Seeing them, they look more like junipers, but with thicker needles to survive the cold at night.
Interesting.
What about the animals up there? What kind of animals are there?
It's like the ground is crawling with insects and all kinds. And the spiders, The spiders start off as babies the size of your fist, and they can get to be 5 meters across. And they're telepathic and they work with the ants. These are all trees. And this is snow. So this is winter conditions in a forest. In the summertime, all of the snow will be melted and you'll have, I wouldn't call it an ocean because it's only like a meter deep. You can walk through it, but this whole area will be in this meter deep water in summer, but only in the daytime. At night, it all freezes again.
So Penny, just kind of reflecting back on everything that you've experienced, did you ever figure out why you? I mean, why?
Yeah. They are targeting people who are discarded royals. Okay, you go through history and you have a king. And the king might have several wives, mistresses, and he'll have a whole house full of kids. He only has jobs for the first. The first male will survive as him. The second one is a backup. And the third one will become some sort of an earl somewhere. And after that, he might marry off girls to other kings to become their allies. But you end up with 2/3 of the kids don't have a job. So they are trained in a trade or married off to a merchant or a banker. And over time, those discarded kids became the middle class. And some of them filtered down even further. My parents owned their own home by the time my father died, but we were not wealthy by any means. But I've done my family tree, and both of my parents are descended from Charlemagne. And that's the bloodline they're looking for. So when you hear all these people talk about, well, if you have the genetics, that's the bloodline they want. So I didn't know this before. This was something that has come to us over time. I have pictures here from NASA of 2 women. This is a blow up, and this is what she looked like in the picture. They worship the female as mother goddess representative, and they do go topless. They consider the milk to be the gift of life. And that's part of why that they had to hide from the Germans and the Americans. They basically dress like this, but without the shirt. And their clothing is mostly blue or black. And no, I don't know what they make the fabric out of.
Interesting.
This is a second one.
That's hard to see.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, they're all really hard to see. You have to be really observant. This helps better than that does. But you have to really pay attention because these folks don't want to be seen.
Of course.
And that's what the men dress like. It's a single piece of fabric that's knotted in the back. So sometimes they'll wear a second piece of fabric over their shoulders. It does get cold there. And
Yeah.
I've heard them described in a lot of ways. What I remember about them is that they're about 7 feet tall instead of 5.5, 6 like we are. And they have an orange tint to their skin, which we're assuming is dietary. And otherwise, they look like Apache. Now, these are the, I got that in the wrong place. Okay. This is art I had done of an incident that happened at Shula. And these are a little almost
They look-
cartoonish compared to the way that the raptors really look.
So
But
they
yes,
look like they look like reptiles for people in the at home, right? They
but
look
this
like,
is they look like raptors out of Jurassic Park, but this was the
Yes.
way the artist insisted on drawing them.
Oh, okay.
He also thought that all German children were blonde. Yeah, I mean,
Mm,
what can I say? But I brought this up because this is what the uniforms looked like.
wow.
White shirts, a gentle skirt for girls, slacks for boys, a Windsor knot orange tie for the boys, a bow tie for the girls, and then a brown cardigan over it.
Hmm.
But this was an incident where the raptors broke into the cafeteria. You can see where he did get that. And because of the abilities that I had, I was able to put some of us inside a force field, and that's this. And you see where it is
Yes.
staticky because he attacked the force field.
Oh,
So
interesting.
that's,
Interesting.
and this is about the color that they painted everything. It was, in those days, it was called habitability green. There were 4 colors. There was a tan, a green,
Yeah.
a pink, and a blue. And these were muddy, ugly colors that did not affect your mood, positive or negative. So
And
every
two pictures
Yeah.
pictures to the left there looks like you have 2 lakes on Mars, and I've seen those pictures, and that is very, very depictive on all on its own. And yeah, this is a NASA print.
yeah, it's a NASA print, and yeah, I got it in the wrong file, but
Yeah.
yes, definitely. You have trees, you have bushes, you have water line, you have everything.
Yeah, and I see that now we're getting down to the end of the show here. So let people know where they can get a hold of you and your shows and whatever else you have out there that they need to know about.
Okay. I have been branding my work as Nachtwaffenpilot so that people can find it. And
Mhm.
since YouTube has been censoring so much, I'm
Mm.
making a second channel at Rumble, and it's also Nachtwaffenpilot. But so far, I've only had trouble with YouTube about music used at breaks. So, but I don't upload anything that's political either. And my radio producer laughs at me about that. He sometimes teases me that I'm a coward, but I figure disclosure movement can stand on its own 2 feet. It doesn't need politics or religion with it.
Mhm. How can
If-
people find your show, Penny?
My show is on Global Enlightenment Radio Network, and the link for that is www.gern-radio.com.
Thank
And
you.
I'm on Saturdays from 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific.
Okay.
And
Wonderful.
once in a while, we end up with something happening that there's not a show, but my archive is on my YouTube at this
Wonderful.
point. And I manage to get one up before I do the next one.
Okay,
So,
that's good.
you know,
Yeah. All right. Man, oh man, was this an education?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah. What
Fascinating.
about our favorite question, Nori? Penny, if you could speak to the whole world and the world was listening, what would you tell them?
well, I'm public because I want the child kidnapping stopped.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
nothing that the factions out there do that cannot be done by consenting adults. There's no reason to be kidnapping children.
Totally agree. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you
for
very much.
having me.
Absolutely.